At exactly 4:48 on a Thursday morning in the southern Caribbean, 340 nautical miles northeast of Caracas, a Venezuelan frigate broke from its patrol pattern and swung its bow toward the USS Nitsa, an Arleigh Burke-class destroyer running a counter-narcotics interdiction track in international waters. The OTO Melara 76mm cannon on the frigate's foredeck fired without any radio contact, without any warning signal, without any of the protocols that separate military posturing from an act of war. The first shells crossed 1,400 meters of dark water in under 2 seconds. The Venezuelan captain believed he had chosen his moment perfectly. Pre-dawn darkness. A maze of island chains behind him providing radar clutter and escape routes. A GPS jamming system already warming up at a shore installation 12 miles west. A drone swarm staged on a converted fishing platform 2 miles north, ready to launch on command. Months of planning. A choreographed ambush designed to bloody a superpower in its own backyard and survive the consequences. He had 17 seconds before the Nitsa's systems began dismantling every assumption that plan was built on. This stretch of Caribbean isn't just geography, it's the most consequential drug corridor on the planet. More than 90% of the cocaine reaching the United States moves through these waters, funneled through the island chains and deep water passages between South America and Florida. Over 1,000 tons annually. The Venezuelan state, or more precisely, the network of generals and government officials that functions as the Venezuelan state, takes a cut of that flow in exchange for port access, fuel, protection, and the deliberate absence of interdiction. American counter-narcotics operations in this corridor aren't just a law enforcement annoyance to Caracas. They are an existential economic threat to the people who actually run the country. That's the context that produced this mission, not recklessness. A calculated decision by people with enormous financial stakes that removing one American destroyer, even temporarily, even at significant cost, was worth attempting. They built a layered trap. They picked their ground carefully. They waited for a night with no moon. What they didn't account for was the aircraft they couldn't see. A P-8A Poseidon had been orbiting at 29,000 feet for 6 hours before the first shot was fired. Its AN/APY-10 multimode radar doesn't work the way people imagine radar works. It isn't painting a single sweep across the surface and waiting for a return. The P-8's synthetic aperture mode takes thousands of discrete radar snapshots per second as the aircraft moves through its orbit, then uses onboard computing to stack those images into a composite picture with a resolution that would have seemed like science fiction 2 decades ago. At 150 miles, it can distinguish the radar cross-section of a Venezuelan frigate from a civilian cargo vessel. At 80 miles, it can read hull numbers. The Nitsa had the Venezuelan frigate's position, course, speed, and weapons configuration on its Aegis display before the Venezuelan crew had completed its pre-dawn watch rotation. Not as a voice report that someone had to transcribe and enter manually. As a live track auto-populated through Link 16, the encrypted tactical data network that connects American airborne sensors to surface combatants in real time. The Combat Information Center aboard the Nitsa knew what was coming. The question was never detection. The question was what the Venezuelan captain would choose to do. He chose to fire. The AN/SLQ-32 electronic warfare suite, which the crew calls Sidekick, responded before the gun smoke had cleared the Venezuelan frigate's barrel. The system operates on a principle that's simple to describe and extraordinarily difficult to execute. It makes the ship electronically smaller. Emissions control dropped the Nitsa's radar signature to the profile of a vessel a fraction of its actual size. Simultaneously, Sidekick began projecting false returns into the electromagnetic environment. Ghost contacts at multiple bearings, each one broadcasting the kind of radar signature a Venezuelan fire control system would find plausible, each one drawing targeting attention away from the actual ship. Venezuelan gunners were engaging Phantoms within 30 seconds of opening fire. The shells that were properly aimed encountered the Evolved Sea Sparrow missile system. The ESSM is worth understanding precisely because it looks from the outside like a small missile designed to kill other missiles, and that description undersells what it actually is. The Aegis combat system aboard the Nitsa tracks incoming projectiles with the Spy-1D phased array radar calculates their trajectory in 3 dimensions and computes an intercept point. Not where the shell is, but where it will be at the precise moment the ESSM arrives. The missile doesn't chase the target. It goes to the meeting place and waits. In its terminal phase, it pulls maneuver loads that would render a human pilot unconscious, making final adjustments based on its own onboard seeker. The engagement sequence from detection to intercept takes seconds. It runs without requiring a human to authorize each individual shot. The Venezuelans had planned for a knife fight. They were discovering that the knife had already been taken off the table. Then the shore installation activated the GPS jamming system. This is where the Venezuelan plan showed genuine sophistication, and it deserves acknowledgement. A localized GPS jamming bubble of sufficient power doesn't just degrade navigation, it disrupts the precision timing systems that modern weapons rely on for terminal guidance. A warship that has been operating in a GPS-degraded environment suddenly finds that some of its most capable weapons require manual recalculation of firing solutions that the navigation systems had been computing automatically. Simultaneously, the drone swarm launched from the converted fishing platform. 40-plus commercial quadcopters modified to carry small explosive charges, their controllers operating from a boat that was already running for Venezuelan waters. The doctrine behind this combination is called anti-access area denial, and when it's executed against the right target in the right conditions, it genuinely works. The drones aren't the weapon, they're the forcing function. They compel the defending ship to activate its close-in systems, drain its attention, and potentially exhaust point defense ammunition on cheap targets, while the real strike develops from another vector. The GPS jamming makes precision responses harder. Together, they're designed to drag a technologically superior opponent down into a close-range brawl, where the advantages of American systems matter less. The NHTSA's commanding officer did something the Venezuelan planners hadn't modeled for. She didn't fight in the phone booth they'd built. The ship executed a course change that, on Venezuelan radar, looked like the beginning of a withdrawal. The frigate's captain saw exactly what he expected. A damaged, disoriented American destroyer falling back, pulling away from the island cover that had sheltered his approach. He followed, committed. Moved his vessel out of the protective geometry of the coastal jamming umbrella, chasing what looked like a retreating enemy. The SM-2 Standard missile doesn't need GPS. This is a point worth dwelling on because it's the technical detail that the entire Venezuelan electronic warfare plan failed to account for. The SM-2, Block 3B, uses inertial guidance for the majority of its flight, an internal accelerometer and gyroscope package that tracks the missile's own movement through space without reference to any external signal. It knows where it is because it measures every acceleration it experiences from the moment of launch. Periodic course corrections come from the NHTSA's Spy-1D radar, which operates on frequencies that the Venezuelan jamming system wasn't designed to suppress. Only in the final seconds of flight does the SM-2's own radar seeker activate, painting the target autonomously. The jamming bubble that was supposed to blind American precision weapons was irrelevant to the missile coming over the horizon from 40 nautical miles away. The order to fire came after battle damage assessment from the P-8 confirmed the frigate had moved clear of the jamming coverage area. Two SM-2s left the NHTSA's vertical launch cells within 4 seconds of each other, their flight paths calculated not just for speed, but for timing. Time on target sequencing. The first missile and the second missile, fired moments apart, arrived simultaneously. This isn't an accident of trajectory, it's deliberate. A single incoming weapon gives a ship's defenses a single problem. Two weapons arriving from slightly different vectors in the same second give it two problems that its close-in systems physically cannot solve simultaneously. The first SM-2 was aimed at the frigate's superstructure, specifically at the 3-foot section of it housing the fire control radar and communications antenna array. The proximity fuse detonated the warhead at precisely the altitude calculated to maximize fragmentation coverage across that section of the ship. The preformed tungsten fragments in the warhead traveled outward at velocities that shredded radar arrays, antenna elements, and electronic housings with the same indifference that a shotgun blast shows to a window screen. The Venezuelan frigate didn't sink. It went blind and mute in the same instant. Its ability to direct weapons, communicate with shore command, or coordinate with any other asset in the area evaporated in approximately 0.003 seconds. The P-8's surveillance camera, watching from altitude in infrared mode, showed a secondary system still active in the aft section. The commanding officer authorized a second engagement. The second SM-2 was aimed lower, at the engine compartment. This wasn't a warning shot or a calibrated demonstration. The kinetic energy of a 9-foot missile, traveling at supersonic speed, delivers a physical impact before the warhead detonates. The combined effect against the engine room produced catastrophic flooding and a fuel fire that the crew, now without communications and with their damage control systems disrupted by the first strike, couldn't coordinate a response to. The Venezuelan frigate broke apart and sank in 11 minutes. The drone swarm, its controllers gone, and its guidance systems now receiving no updated targeting data, continued on its last programmed heading. 40-plus modified quadcopters flying in a ragged formation toward a ship that had already moved 3 miles from the position the controllers had targeted. The Phalanx close-in weapon system acquired them anyway. The Phalanx doesn't need the drones to be where it expected them. Its integrated search and track radar finds them where they are, classifies them against its threat library, computes a firing solution, and opens fire without waiting for human authorization. The M61A1 Vulcan cannon at its core fires 4,500 rounds per minute, not as a hose of bullets, but as a precisely directed stream. The system constantly adjusting dispersion to maximize the probability of hitting targets that are maneuvering, changing altitude, and arriving at different ranges simultaneously. The 20mm tungsten rounds don't punch holes in commercial drone frames. They remove them from the air. The engagement lasted 41 seconds. Every drone in the swarm was destroyed before any reached within 800 yards of the ship. At 06:19, the Caribbean was quiet again. The Nitsa resumed its counter-narcotics patrol track. Flight quarters secured. The Combat Information Center shifted from active engagement posture back to surveillance mode. The P-8 Poseidon continued its orbit overhead, its cameras documenting the debris field expanding across the water where the Venezuelan frigate had been. The intelligence value of the engagement deserves as much attention as the kinetic outcome. Every radar emission the Venezuelan frigate produced during the engagement, its fire control frequencies, its search radar pulse characteristics, its communications protocols, was captured by the NITS's electronic warfare suite and the P-8's signals intelligence package. The shore-based GPS jamming system revealed its operating frequencies and power levels in the process of being used. That information now exists in American electronic warfare databases and will inform the jamming countermeasures built into the next generation of precision weapons. The drone swarm's launch platform, the modified fishing vessel, was tracked by the P-8 to its return course and its eventual position. Its crew didn't know they'd been followed home. Every piece of that intelligence picture has a shelf life measured in years. The Venezuelans spent it all in one engagement. The financial accounting is almost embarrassing to type out, but it belongs in the record. Venezuela lost a frigate valued at approximately $220 million, 3 coastal radar installations damaged in follow-on strikes authorized by Fleet Command, and 81 personnel. The total committed value of the operation, including the jamming system, the drone assets, and the months of planning and preparation, exceeded $250 million by any reasonable estimate. The United States expended 2 SM-2 missiles at roughly $2.1 million each, 4 ESSM interceptors, phalanx ammunition, and operational costs for the P-8 sortie. Total, approximately $12 million in consumables, 0 casualties, 0 ship damage. The Nitsa required no repairs, a 20-to-1 cost ratio in dollars, an incalculable ratio in operational effect. Because Venezuela's Caribbean patrol capability lost a significant fraction of its surface combat power in a single morning, and the deterrent effect of that loss will shape Venezuelan naval planning for however long the current government exists. The lesson that gets extracted from engagements like this one isn't really about weapons. It's about information architecture. The Venezuelan plan was genuinely sophisticated. The GPS jamming, the drone swarm as a forcing function, the use of island terrain for radar masking, the choreographed timing. These weren't improvised tactics. They were the product of serious military planning by officers who understood American doctrine and tried to engineer around it. The plan failed because it was built on a single assumption that turned out to be wrong, that the approach had gone undetected. The P-8 had been watching for 6 hours before the first shot. The Aegis system had a full tactical picture before the Venezuelan captain gave his order. The electronic warfare response, the false returns, the ESSM intercepts, the SM-2 timing, the phalanx engagement, none of it was reactive in the sense of being surprised and catching up. It was the execution of a plan that had been built while the Venezuelan plan was still in motion. The Americans weren't responding to the ambush. They were completing their own operation, which happened to include the Venezuelan frigate as its primary target. This is what information dominance actually means in practice. Not that the technologically superior side has better weapons, though it does. That it makes its decisions from a more complete picture, faster, and with less uncertainty than the opponent. The Venezuelan captain was making decisions based on what he could see. The NITS's commanding officer was making decisions based on what a satellite, a P-8, a towed array sonar, and an integrated data network could collectively see. Those aren't the same picture. They were never going to produce the same outcome. The narcotics corridor remained disrupted for weeks following the engagement. The fishing vessels and go-fast boats that moved product through the area went quiet, their operators correctly calculating that the American naval presence in the aftermath was more intense, not less. The financial damage to the network that had funded this operation was, by some intelligence estimates, more significant than the military hardware losses. Caracas received the engagement report and issued the expected statements about American aggression in sovereign regional waters. Satellite imagery of the debris field, the P-8's infrared footage of the frigate's final 11 minutes, and the acoustic recordings from the Nitsa's hull sensors that captured the opening cannon fire were not available to the international press. They were available to every naval intelligence service with the clearance level to request them. The Brazilian Navy updated its threat assessment models within 72 hours. The Colombian Defense Ministry circulated an internal analysis. The message that reached every regional military headquarters wasn't the one Caracas intended to send. It was the one the debris field sent by existing. They came to the Caribbean with a layered trap, a jammer, a drone swarm, and 4 decades of accumulated doctrine about how to bleed a superpower with asymmetric tactics. What they found was a ship that already knew they were coming, a missile that doesn't need GPS to find its target, and a system that fights at the speed of electronics while human operators are still reading the situation. Some adversaries have to learn that lesson once to understand it. Some have to learn it at greater cost. The ones who never learn it keep sending ships into corridors watched by aircraft they cannot see, targeting destroyers whose fire control systems are faster than the distance between a decision and its consequence. The Caribbean kept moving. The Nitsa kept its patrol track. Somewhere on the ocean floor northeast of Caracas, a Venezuelan frigate that was supposed to change the political calculus of the region is now a navigational hazard, marked on charts but visited only by the fish. If this breakdown gave you something to think about, share it and subscribe. The operations that reshape the balance of power rarely make the front page.